The world is full of unique animals, from tiny ants to massive whales. The variety of species is astounding. Even within a single group of animals, sizes can vary widely. But sometimes there is one species that falls outside of the norm by quite a bit, being significantly smaller than others like it. These are the pygmy animals, and their stories of discovery, struggle, and survival are particularly fascinating. In today's video, we're going to hear the stories of 4 pygmy animal species, and a 5th that might be mislabeled. We'll hear about how they came to be known, the struggles they've faced, and what's being done to ensure that we have them for generations to come. I would be remiss not to mention that humans are among the living beings with pygmy varieties. From the diverse pygmy peoples of the Congo to the tribes of Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. Diversity within human populations is often as impressive as it is in the animal kingdom. I think it's also important to acknowledge the horrific ways that these people groups have been treated throughout history. But the details of their histories is beyond the scope of this video. Welcome to All About Nature. On my channel, I try to bring nature-related content that's entertaining and educational. If you like this kind of content, then please consider liking the video, leaving a comment, and even subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate your support. Sloths have become extremely popular in recent years. People are obsessed with their slow movements and contented demeanors. There are 7 living species of sloth, divided into 2 genera based on the number of digits they have on their forelimbs: the 2-toed sloths and the 3-toed sloths. Among the 3-toed sloths, one species stands out. Located 17 kilometers from the coast of Panama in the Caribbean Sea is a small island called Isla Escudo de Veraguas. This island is only 4.3 square kilometers in size, with about 26 acres of mangrove forest. Until 1995, the island was uninhabited, but fishermen began to settle there permanently. In 2001, 2 researchers visited the island, Robert Anderson of the University of Kansas and Charles Handley Jr. of the Smithsonian Institution. They noted that the sloths on the island were significantly smaller than sloths on the mainland. These sloths also had distinct differences in their fur and skull structures. The species owed its diminutive size to a phenomenon known as insular dwarfism, in which species trapped on islands adapt to the lack of space by becoming much smaller. The sloths lived almost exclusively in the red mangrove forests of the island, and their population was estimated to be at less than 500 individuals. By 2012, the story had changed. 120 fishermen and their families had permanently settled on the island, and another survey of the species was done. Only 79 were found to still be living on Isla Escudo de Veraguas. Today, the species is critically endangered. Major threats to the pygmy sloth include human encroachment, lack of genetic diversity, and sudden, severe natural disasters which could wipe the species out. The pygmy hippopotamus is one of 2 species of living hippos, with the other being the well-known common hippopotamus. It's a small species found in the forests and swamps of West Africa, primarily in Liberia. It is also found in small numbers in Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Ivory Coast, but sadly has already been eradicated from Nigeria. This secretive and nocturnal creature is only half as tall as the common hippopotamus, and weighs less than 25% of the weight of its cousin. The pygmy hippo displays adaptations for both land and water, relying on water to keep its skin moist and regulate its body temperature. Its diet consists of ferns, broadleaf plants, grasses, and fruits found on the forest floor. Due to its elusive nature and rarity, studying the pygmy hippo in its natural habitat is difficult. In the 19th century, it was introduced to zoos, and most of the research we have today on pygmy hippos comes from studying specimens in captivity. In the wild, the pygmy hippo faces threats from habitat loss due to deforestation for agriculture, as well as poaching for bushmeat. The estimated wild population is less than 2,500 individuals, making their survival more secure in captivity than in their natural habitat. Interestingly, this is not the only known species of miniature hippo. In the Mediterranean, the islands of Crete, Sicily, Malta, and Cyprus all had their own dwarf species of hippos. And more recently, the African island nation of Madagascar had a species of hippopotamus, but it went extinct about 500 years ago. Everyone knows what seahorses are. These bony fishes are characterized by their unique body shapes. They swim upright and have long prehensile tails used to anchor themselves to aquatic plants and corals. Their jaws are fused, and they use the tube-like structure that they have for a mouth to suck prey in. And perhaps most unique about these fish is how they hatch their young. The females deposit their eggs in a pouch on the males, where they're fertilized and protected until they hatch. With dozens of known species from across the world, seahorses are scientifically well documented. But in the 1960s, a new species of seahorse was uncovered that opened a whole new world of seahorse discovery. The year was 1969, and Georges Barjabant, a scientist from New Caledonia, was collecting species of Muracella corals for the Noumea Museum. While one of these corals was on his dissection table, he happened to notice a pair of tiny seahorses. They would be easy for anyone to miss if they weren't looking closely. Not only were they tiny, measuring only about 2 centimeters long, they were perfectly camouflaged to the color and the shape of the species of coral that they were attached to. They had one important difference to other seahorse species. Instead of having 2 gill openings on the sides of their heads, they had a single gill opening on the back of their head. The species was given the common name Pygmy seahorse, and for the next 25 years remained the only pygmy seahorse known to science. Then, in 1995, some tiny seahorses were pulled up off the bottom of the ocean off the southeast coast of Australia. These seahorses were given the name bullneck seahorse. In some literature today, they're referred to as pygmy seahorses as well, but they are actually dwarf seahorses. This is because while they are tiny, they still have 2 gills, instead of the single gills that true pygmy seahorses have. But then, beginning in 2003 and continuing on until as recently as 2020, 8 more species of true pygmy seahorses have been discovered. The original species from 1969 had its name changed, and was given the common name of Barjabant's pygmy seahorse. And the others, in order of discovery, are Denise's pygmy seahorse, Coleman's pygmy seahorse, Ponto's pygmy seahorse, Severn's pygmy seahorse, Sadami's pygmy seahorse, Walea soft coral pygmy seahorse, Japanese pygmy seahorse, and Sodwana pygmy seahorse. Elephants are the largest living land animals on Earth. There are 3 recognized species spread across Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. The African bush elephant, the African forest elephant, and the Asian elephant. The smallest species is the Asian elephant, being both shorter and lighter than its African counterparts. There are 3 recognized subspecies of Asian elephant: the Sri Lankan elephant, the Indian elephant, and the Sumatran elephant. But there's one more disputed subspecies: the Borneo Pygmy Elephant. Found only on the island of Borneo, they're restricted to the northeastern corner of the island, primarily in the Malaysian state of Sabah, though there is also a small population in the Indonesian province of North Kalimantan. Referred to as pygmies because they were believed to be smaller than their mainland counterparts, measurements show that they are essentially the same size, with only a slightly smaller skull than other Asian elephant subspecies. So, while they carry the name of pygmy, this is the only animal on this list that really doesn't merit that name. How they got to the island of Borneo is a bit of a mystery. The initial theory was that they were essentially feral elephants that all descended from domesticated elephants sent as gifts about 300 years ago from the Sultan of Sulu to the Sultan of Borneo. This would make them misplaced Sumatran elephants. Their unusually tame and docile natures adds credence to this theory, but recent genetic testing makes other suggestions. One study concluded that they've been isolated on Borneo for about 300,000 years, while other researchers believe that Sumatran elephants were able to walk to Borneo via a land bridge during the last ice age, about 15,000 years ago, when sea levels were much lower. However it is that they got to the island, their future in Borneo is not guaranteed. With only about 2,000 left in the wild, their population has dropped by over 50% in the last 3 generations alone, and the ongoing threats of habitat loss and human encroachment are only making it harder for them to thrive. In the foothills of the Himalayas, there once existed vast wet grasslands. Found at up to 300 meters of elevation, the grasslands of the Terai stretched from Uttar Pradesh in northern India through Nepal to Bangladesh, northern West Bengal, and Assam. With the various species of grass reaching heights of between 1 and 4 meters, this habitat hid a diverse array of species, including giants like Asian elephants, one-horned rhinos, Bengal tigers, Indian leopards, and sloth bears. But the grasses were also home to one of the smallest of its kind, the Pygmy Hog. Being the smallest living species of pig in the world, the Pygmy Hog stands no more than 25 centimeters tall at the shoulder. They're extremely reclusive and use the tall grasses to evade predators. But as the population of India began to explode in the 1940s, humans needed to expand more and more in order to survive. The grasslands the Pygmy Hogs inhabited were attractive for a couple of reasons. For one, the long grasses they produced were ideal for commercial thatch, so large quantities were harvested and sold. But even more alluring was the land the grasses were on. More people meant a need for more food. So, the grasses were burned systematically in order to be used for cultivation. But because of how shy the hogs are, they retracted further and further into remote parts of the grasslands, until in the 1960s, they were no longer seen, leading many to fear that they had actually gone extinct. But in 1971, a fire started in Barnadi Wildlife Sanctuary in Assam. And there, spotted fleeing from the fires, was a small group of Pygmy hogs. The following year, the species was added to India's Wildlife Protection Act, providing it with absolute protection and allowing authorities to give out the highest penalties for offenders. But the species barely managed to hang on over the coming decades. In 1995, the hogs were only known to still exist in Manas National Park, and permits were required to capture several of the hogs. 2 males and 4 females were caught and brought into the first captive breeding program for the species. Within 2 years, their numbers had increased by 600%. But the species couldn't be re-released into the wild directly, as they no longer knew how to survive without human intervention. So, a soft release program was established to acclimatize the hogs to their habitat before full release. As of today, over 100 Pygmy hogs have been released back into the wild, and about 60 remain in captivity to safeguard the species for the future. However, even with all this effort, there are only an estimated 250 Pygmy hogs alive in the world today, making them one of the most threatened mammal species in the world. And that's it for today's video. Had you heard of any of these species before? Do you know any other pygmy animal species? I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons, Kasha, Lael, April, and Colby. Thank you all so much for supporting my channel. And if you want to see more content like this and have a say in what video I make next, consider subscribing to my Patreon. You'll find the link in the video description below. And before you go, please help me out with a like, a comment, and even a subscription if you're new here. It's been so exciting to see my channel finally start to grow, and I would love to have you all along for the journey. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.